Pet loss sucks. There's times where I've worked at Petco in the past. If there's one thing that people don't talk about often when it comes to working in those kinds of workplaces where you deal with animals, you're going to deal with a lot of loss. You're going to have regulars that come into your store and you see your favorite dog or your favorite cat or animal, and then it comes that time where you hear that they passed away. May it be expected due to terminal illness or they just passed away at an untimely manner. I've seen the brightest of people in my life that lost a family pet and their whole demeanor or their whole image changed. It's a tragic loss and it's very traumatic. So I can understand why people feel the way that they feel about their pets, because they're part of the family at the end of the day, and we treat them as a part of the family. I recently just went through a pet loss just around October 29th or October 30th. I just lost a family pet, a Yorkie Terrier by the name of Riley. He was 13 years old. Not only was he a good boy, but he was the best boy to me. And with that said, it comes with a heavy heart that we need to talk about this because the timing here was crazy, but we need to talk about Peanut the Squirrel. Peanut the Squirrel is a very popular rescue animal that took the internet by storm on Instagram and TikTok with over 500,000 followers and counting. We have Peanut the Squirrel, who was seized by the DEC, or the Department of Environmental Conservation. They were seized after a multitude of anonymous complaints. So we're gonna get right into the whole situation because it's rather sad, but at the same time it's getting a little bit controversial in some way. But we're gonna dive into that real quick. Let's get right into the article. Peanut's Instagram account, run by Longo, currently has over 500,000 followers. On its profile is a link to Peanut's Freedom Farm Animal Sanctuary, an animal refuge named after his little furry friend. According to the sanctuary's official website, Longo met Peanut 7 years ago, when Peanut was a baby. Having lost half of his tail in a severe attack, Peanut was not adept enough to live in the wild, so Longo decided to care for the squirrel at home. And this is the squirrel dad here on Instagram. As you can see, not only does he take care of squirrels, but he also runs a sanctuary that he named after Peanut the Squirrel. I've seen his website. There's a lot of horses and cows. He even had like a few alpacas in there. So he seems like a genuine guy that, you know, wants to give animals a second chance at life. So he created this establishment for animals to have that second chance, which I think is a really cool thing. According to the NBC News, the DEC received multiple anonymous complaints about Peanut and showed up at Longo's home with at least 6 officers to take Peanut and Fred away. In a joint statement, the DEC and the Chemung County Department of Health said that they're coordinating to ensure the protection of public health related to the illegal possession of wild animals that have potential to carry the rabies virus. The DEC also notes that it's illegal to keep young wildlife as pets since they are, on quote, not well suited for life in captivity, plus they may carry diseases that can be given to people. After Peanut and Fred were taken away, Longo took to Instagram to call out the individuals who made complaints to the DEC. I was trying to look into more information about the guy and everything and where he is. So this situation took place in New York State. Not New York City, but New York State, like along the lines of like the borderline of like Pennsylvania. He's had this issue with the New York State DEC. They apparently, I'm seeing the word raid a lot. A lot of people are using the word raid, probably because there was a lot of officers that stepped in and they confiscated Peanut the Squirrel and Fred the Raccoon. The issue is that not only did they confiscate the pets, but they also euthanized them as well. Mark Longo, after the raid that happened and the confiscation of Peanut and Fred, Mark Longo will go on to say, well, internet, you won. You took one of the most amazing animals away from me because of your selfishness. To the group of people who called the DEC, there's a special place in hell for you. Today at 10 a.m. Wednesday, October 30th, 2024, the New York State DEC showed up to my house and took Peanut. He was taken to the euthanized. I'm in shock, disbelief, and disgusted to the people who did this to Peanut. For the last 7 years, Peanut has been my best friend. He's been the center of my world and many of yours for so long. I don't know how to process this emotionally. So looking into this whole situation, this may be a little bit of a sidebar, but pretty relevant. I can't help but think about Ming the tiger from back in 2003 in Harlem, New York City. There was this whole thing that happened where you had a man that had a grown-ass tiger by the name of Ming and a grown-ass alligator by the name of Al. And there was a time where he got attacked by a pit bull, as he claims, but the owner, I think his name was Yates, he said that, oh, I was attacked by a pit bull, and I think got bit in his arm or something. But then when he went to the hospital to address it, the doctors were looking at that and they were saying there's no way that's a pit bull because the bite marks were way too big for a pit bull terrier. So of course there were some suspicions, and then, you know, the NYPD had to investigate what was going on in that house, and then lo and behold, there turned out to be a whole ass tiger, and an angry tiger too. There were neighbors that were reporting that they knew Yates had like a mini zoo going on, but it just had a very strong animal odor to it. They just couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. As it turns out, there was an alligator and a tiger in there. You had police officers that really had to grab like one of those ropes and, you know, head on down the side of the building, and they had to shoot the tiger and the alligator with tranquilizer darts through the windows because there was no way they were going to bust right through the door head on and just tackle a tiger. And y'all already know this is coming up as an example, but for those that don't know, we also need to highlight Harambe in this whole thing, because Harambe definitely has a little bit of similarities compared to Peanut the squirrel. There's many people making memes already about Harambe inviting Peanut the squirrel into heaven. For those that don't know about the whole Harambe thing that happened back in 2016, there was a Cincinnati zoo, and there was a 3-year-old child that climbed underneath like some sort of fence, climbed over a fence or something, and fell into an open enclosure where the gorillas reside, including Harambe. So Harambe took it upon themselves to, you know, grab the 3-year-old boy, but it was told that it was more like violent and aggressive that Harambe grabbed the 3-year-old child. A lot of people feared for the child's safety, and the workers behind Cincinnati Zoo took a matter to their own hands to shoot and kill Harambe for the safety of the 3-year-old child. Now, this created a lot of controversy, mainly because Cincinnati Zoo just used their best judgment to shoot Harambe, but they felt that that was a very poor choice on the situation. And then you had the other side of the campfire of people saying that it was justified that Harambe was killed, because what about the 3-year-old boy that probably could have been killed by Harambe to begin with? Then you had like a whole bunch of campaigns, both serious and non-serious, with Harambe being the main motivator behind these campaigns. You also had a lot of memes. There was a lot of songs, tributes, parodies of Harambe. Like, Harambe was officially like the meme of 2016. When you think about memes back in 2016, you can't just leave the conversation without mentioning Harambe. Like, Harambe was a very big part of that internet culture back then. Now, this isn't a comparison between a tiger and a squirrel. This is not saying a squirrel is just as deadly or as aggressive as a tiger, but there are laws around these things where you're not supposed to house these kinds of animals. You have Mark Longo with a squirrel and a raccoon in his home, pets that you're not supposed to have unless you have a special license or whatever permit. I haven't looked into the specifics there. It's kind of crazy to me that he's had the squirrel for 7 years, but he doesn't have any documentation of sort to ensure that, hey, they got their shots, they got their vaccine shots, they're taken care of by me, I'm their owner, these are my documents. A lot of people are arguing that could have been avoided had he had his documentation, and 7 years is too long of a time frame to even get that kind of documentation. But as someone that has worked in Petco for a little bit, I will say that this is one of the biggest examples as to why anytime you own a pet, you need to get your documents, you need to get your permits, you need to get your license or whatever, because if you love these animals so much and you care for them, you should go through the proper channels to ensure that if, God forbid, authorities were to come across your way and say, hey, what's going on here, you have the proper permits and documentation to say, yes, I'm a trusted owner of these animals, I have the permit to have them in my home, we meet all the guidelines and the expectations when it comes to animal care, I got this. But I don't know what Mark Longo had. It seems as if he didn't have any documentation. He said he's pursuing some sort of lawsuit against the DEC, but I don't know if he's going to present any of that by the time he goes to trial. I don't know what that's going to look like. But no matter whether it's his fault or not, it's still a sad situation. You had an animal taken from you after 7 years, and according to the DEC, somebody got bit while they were trying to confiscate Peanut the squirrel and Fred the raccoon, but they mainly got bit by Peanut. On November 1st, Longo took to Instagram to reveal Peanut had been euthanized along with his pet raccoon named Fred by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Despite our passionate outcry for compassion, the agency chose to ignore our pleas, leaving us in deep shock and grief, he said online. In the light of the news, Congressman Nick Langworthy took to X to express his frustrations at how the DEC handled the situation. He said the New York State DEC needs a serious reality check on their ridiculously mistaken priorities. Instead of focusing on critical needs like flood mitigation in places like Steuben County, where local officials have to struggle just to get permits from the DEC to clear debris-filled waterways, they're out seizing pet squirrels. New York taxpayers deserve better. So this part of the article kind of highlights a fucked up part about this dispute. Peanut and Fred were both euthanized, and Longo said that the DEC informed the media of the animal's death before his non-profit Peanuts Freedom Farm. He says, "This demonstrates a troubling lack of respect and empathy. Their lives were precious, and we refuse to accept this loss in silence." According to the DEC and the Chumong County Department of Health, Fred and Peanut were euthanized after a person involved in the investigation was bitten by Peanut. To test for rabies, both animals were euthanized, they said in a joint statement. The animals are being tested for rabies, and anyone who has been in contact with these animals is strongly encouraged to consult their physician. I think it's also worth mentioning that you have people out there that are a little bit confused about how to test an animal for rabies. Like, why do we have to kill an animal to test them for rabies? Like, what's the point of testing them if they're gonna die anyway? The main reason for this is because there are other ways to test for rabies, but the issue is they're not as accurate. The symptoms doesn't appear, so it may not appear on a test from what I understand. So the most accurate way to see if an animal does have rabies is by taking a brain sample, because, you know, rabies usually attack the nervous system, and your brain is in the middle of that nervous system. If there's rabies present on your nervous system, then it's most likely in your brain already, and it's only going to get worse. It's a terrible way to go all around for both animals and humans. Now, the thing with rabies is that it's tricky. It's very tricky because, say the investigator does get bit and they draw blood because they were attacked by Peanut. That doesn't mean the rabies are going to kick in right away. Rabies could be dormant, and you may not see any symptoms until days, weeks, months, or in more extreme cases, years, because the rabies don't really kick in until the rabies reaches your nervous system. Once it attacks your nervous system and it gets to your brain, then that's when rabies start kicking in and you kind of reach a point of no return there. But still, my heart breaks for Mark. It's just an unfortunate situation all around for him. I still feel bad, may it be his fault or not. At the end of the day, he had a pet animal that he loved and he treated like family. It's heartbreaking to have that animal stripped from you at a blink of an eye, and then on top of that you hear that your animal is going to get euthanized because they claim that somebody got bit by your pet. Now, I do want to emphasize that the whole confiscation of Peanut the squirrel and the euthanization of Peanut the squirrel are two separate situations. I'm pretty sure that they could have just confiscated Peanut without euthanizing. They just wanted to know what was going on with the pet. I think he didn't have any documentation or couldn't prove that he was an owner or a trusted owner for these pets. So they wanted to confiscate Peanut the squirrel until they figure some things out. But unfortunately, in the middle of that investigation, that raid or whatever, it turned out that one of the investigators got bit by the Peanut the squirrel. So now that escalated to a euthanization because we don't know if Peanut the squirrel had any rabies shots. And I genuinely believe it's an unfortunate situation, especially when you have 6 officers, you know, coming into a home, and the squirrel probably panicked, the squirrel probably freaked out a little bit and just bit someone. And now it escalated to this, and that resulted in a loss. A terrible situation all around. I feel for Mark. I hope he figures some things out and finds peace. I'm pretty sure losing 2 pets, let alone 1, is a traumatic experience. He kind of just lost them in a blink of an eye. But I would also hope that if he goes to proceed this in a legal manner, that he has the documents to prove that, you know, he has the permits and he has the proper resources and went through the proper channels to be a trusted caretaker for squirrels and raccoons and other animals in his home. But other than that, it's a sad situation, but I feel as if there's a lot of context missing. I don't know much about Mark Longo other than him owning a rescue farm shelter for wild animals and then housing a raccoon and a squirrel. I just hope that he has the proper resources and permits that he needs to show everyone, like, yes, I am a trusted owner. I hope Mark has something in his back pocket if he decides to pursue this legally. This situation sucks all around. Rest in peace, Peanut the squirrel and Fred the raccoon. Pretty unfortunate all around. I'll see you guys later. Peace.